Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome from here in the UK. Thank you very much, Mervyn, for inviting me to speak at the third Good Governance Academy event. I'm very honoured. And thank you so much for mentoring me over the past 7 years since we first met in London at the launch of the Integrated Reporting Framework in 2013. Of course, it would have been fantastic to be in South Africa in person, especially as it is a country I love, having visited there some 10 years before. I have many happy memories of the wonderful people, the beautiful scenery, the amazing beaches and the wildlife, the baboons, the penguins, and I was looking forward this year to seeing the elephants, the giraffes and the tigers, but c'est la vie, maybe next year. But it's a credit to the team of the Good Governance Academy that we're able to communicate virtually to a wider audience and the thought leadership the Good Governance Academy has to convey around critical governance issues for societal well-being for our future leaders. Today, I will be discussing the important concept of integrated thinking, and I will highlight why I believe it is an essential tool for the creation of sustainable value. In my presentation today, I will firstly outline to our online audience, hello, the context of the times we currently live in, which I believe are as a result of unintegrated thinking. I will then highlight what I believe integrated thinking is not just important, but also essential for future sustainable development. Next, I will outline what integrated thinking is and how it can be applied in practice. And finally, I will consider the criticisms, the benefits, and what I see as the way forward for integrated thinking. The world appears to be at a crossroads. New technologies are opening up new opportunities to boost economic growth, reduce inequality, and promote inclusiveness. But we are also seeing a world deglobalizing, with civil wars and political populism driving uncertainty about international relations. We have an important choice to make between a more open, inclusive, and interconnected world and one that is closed, siloed, and unequal. As the world changes ever faster, thoughtful leaders are increasingly recognize that we are not only failing to solve the persistent problems we face, but we are in fact causing them. All too often, well-intentioned efforts to solve pressing problems create unanticipated side effects. For example, growing advances in technology have increased our ability to save lives and create medical treatment for all. But a direct result of this has been increased lifespan and the growth of the population. In the past 50 years or so, the growth of population has boomed and is turned into overpopulation, which in itself causes resource depletion, environmental degradation, malignant diseases, conflicts and war, and rising unemployment. Regarding income inequity, by 2030, the richest 1% will own 2/3 of global wealth. In the UK alone, the 100 wealthiest people today have as much money as the poorest 18 million. Chief executives of FTSE 100 companies pocket an average of 5.3 million each year, compared to £13,662 for someone on a national living wage of £7.20 an hour. And technological advances are replacing tasks previously performed by unskilled workers, leading to unemployment, which further increases income inequity. So our decisions and actions provoke outcomes we did not foresee. Today's solutions become tomorrow's problems. Today's challenges, overpopulation, pollution, societal inequity, are the results of systems that we have created. They are the unanticipated side effects of our own actions, side effects created by our inability to understand and to act in compatibility with our long-term goals and aspirations. To address this, Integrated thinking helps us expand the boundaries of our mindset, helps people and organisations see themselves as part of a larger system, so that we become aware of and take responsibility for the outcomes created by our decisions that shape the world in ways large and small, desired and undesired. If you ask people to name processes that strongly affect human welfare, but over which we have no control, many people name the weather, echoing Mark Twain's famous quip that everyone talks about the weather, but no one does anything about it. But today, even the weather is endogenous. We shape the weather across the globe, from global warming to urban heat islands, drought to flooding, the Antarctic ozone to the Asian brown cloud. For those who feel that global warming, the ozone holes and the brown cloud are too distant to worry about, consider this. Human influence over the weather is now so great that it extends even to the chance of rain at the weekend, according to research by Sir Venny Bolling, who demonstrated that there is a 7-day cycle in the concentration of pollutions around the eastern seaboard of the United States. Pollution from cars and industry builds up over the working week and dissipates over the weekend. Since there are no natural 7-day cycles, they suggest that weekly forcing by such pollutants affects cloud formation and hence the probability of rain. The data shows that the chance of rain is highest in the weekend, while on average the nicest and driest day is Monday, when few are free to enjoy the outdoors. Not many people understand that driving that big SUV to work spoils their weekend weather plans. To try and tackle climate change and other societal and environmental issues, the parties behind the formation of the International Integrated Reporting Council undertook the initiative to drive integrated thinking forward, with a vision for a world in which integrated thinking is embedded within mainstream business practice, facilitated by integrated reporting as a corporate reporting norm. In 2019, around 2,000 listed companies in over 70 countries are using such an approach for their reporting, and that number is growing. According to Judge Professor Mervyn King, integrated thinking is the revolutionary immensity of the IRRC. The globalization of businesses, which has occurred over the last few decades, has made many companies more powerful than some national governments. Globalization has made it easier for companies to exploit cheap labour, plunder natural resources, and cause serious consequences for the natural environment and human health through pollution. But that is changing as societies become more informed and less tolerant since the rise of the internet and social media. This is reflected in growing policies around the world relating to accountability and transparency, driven by corporate scandals and failures, as well as the global financial crisis. Hence, there are increasing expectations from society and business to solve their social and environmental issues, such as poverty, societal inequity, resource scarcity, and climate change. Organisations therefore need to understand their place in the dynamic business environment, often referred to as a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And they need to consider how they will react to these changes in that environment. These changes may stem from technological advances, increasing expectations from key stakeholders, threats to the capitals, the resources on which an organisation depends, or competition in the marketplace. For example, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, people and businesses are now adapting to technological means of communicating, much like today. For airline industries, this may mean less business travellers, including Mervyn, or for universities, this may mean a greater demand for online learning. Organisations therefore may be forced to change in order to survive and remain successful, and in many cases are developing new business models that recognise the need to innovate and do more with less. For example, Coca-Cola, whose business relies heavily on water as a resource, recognised that water was a finite natural asset on planet Earth, so they devised a long-term strategy of reusing, replenishing, reducing the use of, and recycling water. Hence, companies need to be fully aware of their purpose and how they depend on other resources to achieve that purpose. This leads to a consideration of the organisation as a system within the environment, rather than a series of internal operations. The key to regarding an organisation as a system, and hence the importance of the relationships between those interdependencies. So they need to consider interdependencies between one part of the system and another. For example, Novo Nordisk, a leading healthcare company, focusing on the three essential elements of sustainable development, the economy, the environment, and society, led to programs to improve diabetes care in China. According to the company, its programs led to economic gains through enhanced brand, increased market share, and increased sales, while at the same time improving society and the environment through improving physician health education and patient outcome. Of course, companies must still make a profit to satisfy shareholders and to attract new investment to enable it to continue to operate, to pay wages, suppliers, taxes. But the business must also ensure it makes and does not destroy value for key stakeholders and society in the long term, in order to retain its social license to operate. In my own research, based on 36 interviews with senior executives in mainly FTSE 100 companies, several organisations were starting to realise the importance of environmental and societal issues to their business. For example, one executive in the utility sector stated, "Climate change, population growth, all these pressures on society are also pressures on our business. So there isn't really a separation. So to report on them as a whole makes sense." While another executive in the house building sector stated, "I think that the expectations on what companies are doing and saying and how they are behaving in the world has gone far beyond that you are financially viable." The pursuit of short-term profit to the detriment of other key stakeholders can impact on the long-term sustainability of the economy, as well as the organisations that continue to pursue that strategy. It helped create the financial crisis and resulted in $2 billion being wiped off Tesco's value as its profit overstating scandal sent shares sliding, while Volkswagen AG lost almost a quarter of its market value overnight after it admitted to cheating in US air pollution tests for years. Building strong relationships with key stakeholders, such as establishing a loyal customer base, developing intellectual capital through investment in systems and employee training, and managing environmental risks, such as resource scarcity and climate change, tend to fall off the radar when corporate executives think short term, but they are critical to long-term success. Particularly those companies who have used profits to invest in longer-term value creation, such as digital transformation, talent, research and development, and their customer relations, have proved to be more resilient during the COVID-19 pandemic. This longer-term strategy now gives these companies an ability to react in a way that other companies lack. Microsoft, for example, ranked first in the Just Capital Stakeholder Company rankings, is a collaborator in Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Tracker and is providing teachers with access to training for its Teams program to teach remotely. It can do so because of its business model, but also because its stakeholders expect it to step up in times such as these. Happy stakeholders increases organisational reputation and value. Particularly, the 2016 UK Reputation Dividend Report finds that reputation contributed $790 billion to shareholder value at the start of 2016, which is just over 1/3 of market capitalisation in the FTSE 350. In particular, this report highlighted that the economic impact of corporate responsibility was the highest growth reputational factor, thus demonstrating the importance of clearly showing the linkage between economic, societal, and environmental impacts. Does short-termism destroy value? This question is increasingly debated by leaders in business, government, and academia. Research by Barton, Manika, and Williamson in 2017 tracked data on 650 non-financial US companies from 2001 to 2014, which represented approximately 60 to 65% of total US market capitalisation. They used several standard metrics as proxies for long-term behaviour and examined how all 615 companies performed. The results were clear. As these graphs show, the long-term focused companies surpassed their short-term focused peers in several important financial measures: revenue, earnings, market capitalisation, economic profit, and gained significantly more jobs. These companies also delivered above average returns to shareholders and had a 50% greater likelihood of being in the top quartile at the end of the period measured. If all US companies had taken a similarly long-term approach, these researchers estimate that public equity markets could have added more than $1 trillion in asset value and additional GDP. Again, the positive financial impacts of considering society and the environment are clearly demonstrated with the SAP, a European multinational software company, who indicate that just 1% increases in human capital in the areas of employee engagement, business health culture and employee retention, and natural capital in the areas of CO2 emissions have significant impacts on their financial value, ranging from $5 million to $90 million. So I believe this quote by Einstein reflects the rationale for integrated thinking, as it really sums up that in a rapidly changing environment, businesses need to think and act differently. Gaining top management support is essential for integrated reporting and integrated thinking adoption. Therefore, successful leaders of the future need to be equipped with the right education and training to ensure that they are able to influence and change the path that people and organisations take, to ensure that future development is done sustainably to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Millennials are estimated to exceed 2 billion around the world, accounting for 27% of the adult population in the United States and 24% in Europe. Millennials make up the biggest generation in US history, even larger than the baby boom generation, of which I am part. Numerous studies have concluded that millennials demand transparency about how the products and services that they consume impact the planet and their own well-being, making it even more important for companies of the future to demonstrate the positive impacts on society and the environment if they want to attract and retain customers, investors, and talent. I'm involved in an Erasmus project called ISSUE, Sustainable Solutions for Sustainability in Higher Education, where a team of universities in the UK, Spain, Hungary, Germany, Finland, and Slovenia have developed training initiatives such as training to implement integrated reporting in universities, which the UK team, including myself, was involved in. And initial reports are starting to emerge. Developing an escape room, which is a spaceship currently under construction in Budapest, and a 21-day challenge initiative based on the Sustainable Development Goals designed to change mindsets. The aim of these innovative initiatives is to inform tomorrow's leaders of the challenges of the future and to equip them with the tools to meet those challenges. Economist Milton Friedman famously stated in the 70s, "A corporate executive is an employee of the owners of the business. He has a direct responsibility to his employers, i.e. the shareholders. That responsibility is to conduct the business in accordance with their desires, which generally will be to make as much money as possible, while conforming to the basic rules of society." At this time, there were no limits to growth, since resources were perceived to be an endless supply, and the planet was expected to cope with the pollution business created, given enough time. Environmental and social issues emerging were judged as being separate to the main activity of the business and were seen as an unnecessary expense towards the goal of creating maximum returns for shareholders. This mindset is no longer relevant to companies if they wish to survive and retain their social license to operate. A company that has a narrow view based on financial capital alone fails to mitigate its risks and realise its opportunities. Organisations are therefore shifting their focus from considering just financial capital, i.e. shareholder value, to shared value based on the premise that sustainable development requires the recognition that the three dimensions of sustainable development, the economy, society, and the environment, are indivisible and integrated, with the ultimate aim for systems value. A shift from a shareholder value model to the system value model, where businesses in no way hinder and ideally contributes to society's progress and future fitness, requires a company to articulate a change purpose to optimise its longer-term sustainable value and to demonstrate good corporate citizenship. A move from a shareholder-centric model that fails to consider the needs of other key stakeholders is reflected in current thinking across the globe. For example, in the US, the Harvard Business Review proposes that the overall long-term health of an organisation must be a priority for companies. They propose a company rather than a shareholder-centred approach to governance that considers a broader and more diverse range of stakeholders, with differing objectives, incentives, time horizons, and preferences. They argue that in a free market system, companies succeed only if customers want their products, employees want to work for them, suppliers want them as partners, shareholders want to buy their shares, and communities want their presence. Figuring out how to maintain these relationships and deciding when trade-offs are necessary among the interests of these various groups are central challenges of corporate leadership. Agency theory's implied decision rule that managers should always maximise value for shareholders oversimplifies this challenge and leads eventually to systematic underinvestment in other important relationships. Again, in the US, the Business Roundtable, an association of chief executive officers of America's leading companies, has agreed to give all stakeholders equal priority in defining the purpose of a company. While in Australia, the Group of 100, which advances the interest of Australian business, asks, should we, not can we, thus advocating the idea of good corporate citizenship. While in the UK, the Financial Reporting Council, responsible or formally responsible for regulating auditors, accountants and actuaries, has revised Section 172, which deals with directors' duties, requiring them to give stakeholders equal priority. They state that 3 issues are important for corporates and underpin what Section 172 is trying to do. Firstly, building trust in business and demonstrating that business is doing the right thing, thus similar thinking to Australia. 2, anticipating and managing public challenge, reputational impact and scrutiny, thus recognise the importance of the link between reputation and value creation. And 3, building and embedding wider stakeholder engagement into decision making, not just relying on a purely shareholder-centric model. All these perspectives are compatible with the ethos of integrated thinking. We're now going to have a poll on how big a risk you believe climate change is to the global economy. Caroline, can you set that up? So if you could just take a minute and consider whether you think the risk of climate change to the economy is going to impact it in terms of billions, millions, thousands, or no risk.
Thanks, Fiona. We're getting a great response here. We've got 40% of the people have answered so far. So
excellent.
It's rapidly coming through. And getting overwhelmingly, we've got most of the votes coming through as being significant risk. Only 16% are at reasonable risk. We've got none for minimal and no risk so far.
Good, so all our audience are well informed.
Yeah, we've been going for about a minute now. We've got 70% of the votes. I think if we give it another couple of seconds, you just let me know when you want to end the polling and I'll give you the final results.
Okay, if you can end it now, Carolyn.
Great. There we go. I'll share the results. We've 83%. Can you see those shared results?
Yeah. Excellent. And it was actually a bit of a trick question because it's actually more than billions of dollars. It is, in fact, trillions of dollars, which I'll explain in the next slide. Thank you all for voting. According to Gleason White, the author of the book 6 Capitals, or Can Accountants Save the Planet? Accountants' failure to account for nature represents the biggest accountancy scandal of all in terms of externalities. However, finally recognising the importance of climate change to the longer-term sustainability of businesses and indeed the planet, global accountancy bodies are now calling on the profession to put sustainability and the fight against climate change at the forefront of its work. Signed as part of the A4S Accounting Bodies Network, which represents over 2.5 million accountants worldwide, this collective call to action asks accountants across the globe to commit to a fight against climate change by firstly integrating climate change risk into organisational strategy, finance, operations and communications, and 2, supporting sustainable decision making and providing sound advice and services. However, according to leading researcher Carol Adams, accountants may be hampering long-term value creation through their focus on financial aspects of a business. She asserts that the accountants of today need to acquire greater skills in non-financial accounting, reporting and auditing, and a change in mindset to embrace the wider perspective in business externalities. Companies that focus purely on short-term returns are ignoring the potentially catastrophic systemic risks to the long-term sustainability. The significant damage that climate change will bring, decreased labour productivity, mass migration, the exacerbation of chronic and communicable diseases from higher temperatures, food and water shortages amid drought and desertification, and even worse, physical losses from extreme weather events will cost trillions, so not billions, trillions. Research by Moody Analytics in 2019 into the impacts of climate change found that the global economic damage is estimated to be $54 trillion in 21,000 under a warming scenario of 1.5 degrees and $69 trillion under a warming scenario of 2 degrees Celsius, a threshold widely seen as the limit to stem its most dire effects. Moody Analytics further warns that passing that 2-degree threshold could hit tipping points for even larger and irreversible warming feedback loops, such as permanent summer ice melt in the Arctic Ocean, and predicts that rising temperatures will universally hurt worker health and productivity, and that even more frequent extreme weather events will increasingly disrupt and damage critical infrastructure and property. Since the early 1970s, humanity has been demanding more of the planet that it can renew. Humans currently demand the equivalent of 1.7 planets worth of resources and ecological services, with major imbalances across countries, resulting in a noticeable decline in the world's biodiversity and threatening the well-being of future generations and the planet's stability. Exceeding the Earth's biocapacity is possible only in the short term. Only for a brief period can we cut trees faster than they mature, harvest more fish than the oceans can replenish, or emit more carbon into the atmosphere than the forests and oceans can absorb. The consequences of overshoot are already clear: habitat and species loss, and the accumulation of carbon in the atmosphere. Concerns over climate change, depletion of the world's finite natural resources, and societal inequities which current financial and sustainability frameworks fail to address have been significant drivers for the introduction of integrated reporting as an alternative to existing practices. Integrated reporting is defined as a process founded on integrated thinking, whose definition is here, which results in a periodic integrated report by an organisation about value creation over time and related communications regarding aspects of value creation. This definition highlights that integrated reporting is aimed to be an essential critical tool to embed integrated thinking throughout an organisation, rather than just being a combination of different corporate reports, such as financial or sustainability. In today's world, where the financial and manufactured assets of a business can account for as little as 20% of market value, businesses need to consider a new lens to understand and explain how value is created and how success can be sustained in the longer term. In integrated reporting, rather than using a narrow focus on financial profit, value is created or destroyed over the short, medium and long term through the lens of 6 capitals: financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social and relationship, and natural, within a company's business model, which represents its chosen system of inputs, business activities, outputs and outcomes. Integrated thinking involves fostering a culture of collaboration and integration between different functions of the business, to consider the business model and identify trade-offs between the use of the different capitals in the development of strategy. It is about connecting performance with purpose. It involves identifying, executing, and monitoring business decisions and strategies for long-term value creation. It builds on the need to reconcile competitiveness and sustainable growth within the context of inclusive business models in order to take advantage of the opportunities and face the challenges of the market. Successful integrated thinking requires an appropriate culture, communication systems, and training, which leads to an enhanced understanding of the relationships between the operating and functional units of an organisation. This understanding creates significant cultural changes in attitudes and ways of doing things by facilitating more productive dialogue between departments that helps break down internal barriers and silos, thus improving decision making, leading to better performance. Additionally, through integrated thinking, organisational teams may better appreciate and understand the impact of their decisions, behaviour and processes on key stakeholders, other internal units and the organisation as a whole. Integrated thinking has tools that assist organisations in moving from a shareholder-centric model. It involves lateral integration through consideration of 6 capitals rather than focusing on financial capital. It includes temporal integration, ensuring that the focus moves away from the short-term profit to longer-term value creation. It also considers the concepts of materiality, the value chain, and connectivity. For connectivity, it asks organisations to consider how value creation in one part of an organisation may impact value creation elsewhere. For example, saving money and employee training may reduce financial costs and increase profit, but it will also reduce employee productivity, innovation, morale, and employee retention, which could have bigger negative financial implications in the long term. Integrated thinking enables organisations to understand the system in which they operate. The operating context and external factors should define the environment in which the organisation interacts. These include the macroeconomic situation, the availability of natural resources and social capital, market circumstances, the competitive landscape, technology, supply chain, labour conditions, and the regulatory environment. An organisation needs to continually monitor and analyse these factors when defining and fine-tuning its business model. It's important that management takes the lead in providing the required governance and oversight structures, since the integrated reporting concept of value stems from the notion that the interaction between an organisation and its operating environment has become more intense and mutually dependent. An analysis of the correlation, i.e. the significance of the impacts or dependencies between capitals and stakeholders, helps set the boundaries for integrated reporting and thinking, i.e. what to include, exclude in the report and decision making. In addition, by analysing the 6 capitals in such a way, an organisation can enhance the robustness of its stakeholder analysis. An organisation also needs to consider materiality, being matters that can substantially affect an organisation's ability to create value in the short, medium and long term. The Crown Estate, an early integrated reporting adopter, highlighted the link between determining materiality for reporting and managing their business. They stated, identifying material issues enables us to focus our management time and attention where it really matters. It allows us to drive business growth, which, at its core, is sustainable in the short, medium and long term. Integrated thinking allows organisations to identify and test a wider variety of possible outcomes and solution pathways, and expand the choices available to that organisation, and identify the choices where they can develop significant leverage. It helps keep the focus and long-term strategy, which depends on sound management and oversight, nurturing stakeholder relations, investment in technology and people, acting as a good corporate citizen, and the availability of natural resources. Integrated thinking involves dialogue and collaboration, which facilitates changing our thinking to match the interconnected dynamic complexity of our communities and their environment, and changes our behaviour to work with the complex forces in the system rather than against them to realise our vision. It allows us to communicate with others, to create new creative ways of thinking and seeing, to harness social learning process to help us develop a shared understanding and to take action collectively, and to become more aware of the potential for the unintended consequences of our actions. Developing KPIs is also important to allow us to measure our performance, to reach our targets, and obtain feedback and modify as required. In looking at academic literature, several critics argue that integrated thinking is vaguely defined and that it's not clear how the concept should be applied. Also, Feng and others stated there is no consensus among practitioners regarding how integrated thinking works in practice, although I would imagine this will differ according to the organisation and the industry it operates in. Other research highlights the lack of academic studies that illustrate actual cases of integrated thinking, why it takes place, is it developed naturally or radically implemented, and how does integrated thinking, how is it traced through to the actual integrated report? So this highlights an opportunity for researchers to explore these areas. Regarding the concept of integrated thinking, Demey and Dye argued that it will not be easy for integrated thinking to penetrate an entrenched culture, especially at the lower levels, because most companies that take on integrated reporting are most likely successful businesses that are already well managed and transparent. Another issue they highlight that companies with entrenched cultures are difficult to change, or may take a considerable amount of time to change, or may fall under the influence of other external environmental issues. According to Demey and others, one potential failing of integrated thinking is that it encourages staff to think in the same way and focus on the same organisational risks. They consider that this may be an impediment to independent and innovative thinking that can often occur in smaller groups. Hence, one-size-fits-all approach advocated by the IRRC, they argue, may not work, and some functions may function better as independent groups. For example, they state that creating a silo around something like risk management and protecting a company from fraud is crucial to safeguarding its existence. Therefore, they argue it is better to leave these employees to think independently and allow them to focus on protecting the organisation from material risks. To ensure integrated reporting continues to meet the wider goals of financial stability and sustainable development, the IRRC is refreshing the integrated reporting framework, and many of you will have given some input into this process, as did I, and it's ongoing throughout 2020. So I'm sure some of these criticisms will be addressed as part of this process. Regarding advantages of integrated thinking, several academics find evidence that integrated thinking leads to significant internal and external benefits. Internally, it facilitates the breaking down of organisational silos, leading to improved internal communications, greater proactivity, better decision-making, and focus on longer-term strategic goals. Externally, it results in increased trust in key stakeholders, attracts longer-term investors, provides more accurate analyst forecasts, and perhaps as a result of better decision-making, leads to improved financial performance and firm value. I should point out that integrated thinking isn't just for larger organisations. I'm involved in an Erasmus project that is looking at integrated reporting for SMEs. For many countries, SMEs represent the backbone of the economic system, and they can often be important players regarding the well-being of local and regional communities, with considerable potential for employment creation. In 2018, Europe alone accounted for 25 million SMEs, being 99.8% of overall companies, with a level of employment in the private sector that represented 2/3 of jobs and more than 55% of the value added in the EU. Compared to SMEs, the share of large companies was and still is minimal. Additionally, the environmental impact of SMEs is significant, and estimates indicate that they account for 45% of total energy use, 43% of serious pollution, and 60% of total commercial waste. SMEs have inherent characteristics that can allow them to move more easily towards the implementation of integrated reporting. Owing to their very nature, they are rooted in the territory of origin, sharing values and culture with the local communities and stakeholders. They also tend to pay attention to details, thanks to their smaller size, which generally grants a less complex and more agile structure. The frequent presence of the entrepreneur and his or her family in company operations and governance roles may assure a relatively natural application of integrated thinking in the running of the organisation. Additionally, relational and organisational intangibles, as well as human qualities and skills, are basic resources for the vitality and long-term survival of SMEs, so their consideration and value creation is important. The IRRC's Integrated Thinking and Strategy Group has published a new model for integrated thinking. The group, made up of over 50 organisations globally, came together to co-create a common view of integrated thinking that is globally relevant to help build resilient, future-fit businesses. I recommend that you read their 2019 report. It's a great report. They visualise integrated thinking as moving from a single financial string to the 6 strings, the capitals, whose impacts need to be evaluated together. Taken together and over time, the actions of these different strings can create value in new ways, or magnify the value creation process over time, or be scaled back by negative impacts from one of the strings. Visually, if we were to tie the strings together and show their changing impact over time, we could visualise the result as a spring, which represents a proactive consideration of time and causality, allowing the spring to flex and respond more positively and sustainably over the short, medium and long term. The group developed a landscape map of initiatives that relate to integrated thinking to help organisations make sense of this complex environment, and I think they identified 120 initiatives overall. By using credible resources suggested in this landscape map, organisations adopted integrated thinking can come to an early decision on the use of globally accepted concepts, such as the Capital Coalition or the UN Global Compact, that many organisations have found useful to their own integrated thinking journeys. They identify 3 categories of internal challenges to integrated thinking. The first is strategic, relating to company leadership not buying into or understanding the reasons behind a shift towards integrated thinking. So this emphasises the importance of educating our future leaders and also communicating the benefits of integrated thinking, which we are doing today. The second is organisational, which I've touched on previously, relating to cultural challenges such as inertia in moving away from a Friedmanite model that may have dominated thinking for years, or silos that have become embedded into structures, preventing integrated thinking from prospering. So ABN AMRO, the 3rd largest bank in Australia, suggests a just do it approach. Thirdly, the barrier is analytical, which relates to lack of or inadequate data and related systems and processes to support integrated thinking. But we have to remember that it's taken 150 years for systems for financial information to develop to where they are today. So this will be an evolving process. The group provide advice and tips that could help implement integrated thinking based on the experiences of early adopters. For example, ABN AMRO suggests organisations look for a common language that speaks to your different stakeholders, whereas Solway trained every single board member on understanding and dealing with sustainability issues so that all decisions are intentionally taken with a broader perspective built into them. Finally, the Integrated Thinking and Strategy Group are seeking our feedback to help them review the group structure, introduce new work streams to reflect emerging innovations and identify next steps in the journey. They aim to learn and develop a lot more in the coming year and to share that in a new report at the end of 2020. According to Mark Twain, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Make sure you make a difference by providing some feedback and be part of making changes that will ensure integrated thinking develops to safeguard our future economy, protect our future environment, and create a better future for us all. Thank you. And I'll take questions now.
Thank you, Fiona. That was great. We've got a couple of questions that have lined up there. And I see Holly Clarkson, you've also raised your hand. If you can use the Q&A and ask your question there. The one I'd like to ask is, I've got two one from Morgan and one from Paul, but specifically one from Oscar. Oscar is asking, is integrated thinking tending towards socialism, democratic socialism, for example? Is it possible to have the conservatives in America provide leadership by championing a process that is counter pure capitalism? Essentially what Oscar is asking, as I understand it, is integrated reporting supportive of pure capitalism, or is it, is it tending towards providing a different model?
A
difficult question.
I never comment on political factors, but I think what it's trying to do is, obviously companies, as I said, the companies have to make a profit, but as well they need to consider the environment and society. So I think it's moving towards, societal benefits, environmental benefits, working together with society and the environment rather than being self-interested, which previously, companies were. So it's moving towards a better world, a better society. How that fits into the political scheme of things, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Fiona. I have one here from Morgan. Morgan was asking the cost related to integrated thinking action. So your slides on integrated thinking action and reportive. So those costs and reporting, those costs may be prohibitive for specifically the SMEs. So small, medium, and micro enterprises. For an SMME, for them to establish their impact on the environment, whether it's negative or positive, they would need resources to make that happen. Would this mean employing another person or part of a person to do this job? How practical is this for SMMEs?
As I said, integrated reporting and thinking is an evolving process, and it takes time and it's gradual. And I think with any organisation, you've got to weigh up the costs with the benefits. But I know many SMEs have found significant benefits, such as, attracting the ability to get loans, because it's easier and cheaper to get loans, because they're able to tell their story about value creation. And also I think it helps the SMEs in decision making. So I think when SMEs are looking at whether to progress this, they need to look not at the short-term costs, but they need to look at the longer-term value creation.
Thank you, Fiona. One from Rodney. What is the link between data analytics and the integrated thinking? So how is there a link between integrated thinking and data analytics? I think maybe in terms of the verb, integrating your thinking using data analytics. Is it something you can provide us with some guidance on?
Well, I think data analytics are a great tool for which to look at your data and try and look at how different aspects of that data link together. It helps you look at what KPIs are important, how you might monitor these, how you might meet your targets. So, the more data and the right data is always useful for integrated thinking and decision making.
Thank you. I have one here from Edmund Jenica, colleague of mine at Candor Governance. He says, Dr. Robertson, thank you. How do you relate the 6 capitals with ESG? He says, it seems one and the same, but there are fine nuances embedded in ESG, which are becoming more important in integrated thinking and reporting. So specifically, how do you relate those 6 capitals with ESG?
I've actually not really thought about that too much, but the 6 capitals do relate to the economic, the social. The added one, I guess, is governance, and good governance oversees everything that goes towards making a good report and goes towards integrated thinking. So, and I know actually one company, I probably can't name them in my research, that actually named one of their capitals, one of the resources, as governance. So they were moving towards possibly trying to be more compatible with ESG. But governance is important, as are, the capitals that are important, the resources that a business uses. But, they do link together. Maybe there are fine nuances, but I haven't studied that.
Thanks, Fiona. So here's another question about SMEs. And Jonah is saying that he's noticed that SMEs are far more focused on financial capital. And how would you go about changing that, their mindset? So they don't have much that's available, obviously, for consulting services and to pay the bill of, those environmental factors and natural capital, understanding that. How would you go about convincing an SME that they need to consider more than just financial capital?
Well, obviously, SMEs, they're not regulated, and in the EU, they don't have to conform with the non-financial directive. But I think it's about informing and educating. I know IFAC do a lot of work around trying to promote SMEs, the own work that we're doing. We hope to develop training. So it's about training, it's about informing, it's about communicating the benefits to SMEs and maybe providing some support. But yes, there will be a cost, but I think in the long term, the benefits will outweigh the costs.
Thank you, Fiona. And I think we've got time for one last one here from John. John says, and this is a more difficult one. It's about overpopulation. He says, to what extent should businesses be concerned with overpopulation? And there's a lot of talk about this being overpopulation being the root cause of many problems facing society today. How do you feel about overpopulation and addressing that in an integrated thinking, or integrating your thinking way?
I think it's a very serious issue, and it does affect companies because we have a lot of older workers and people that are reaching retirement and maybe working on beyond the years. We're finding governments that can't afford to sustain pensions, and a lot of companies are finding problems with their pensions and maintaining them for people that live longer. With integrated thinking, it does include society, and businesses can take advantage of the older population as well as the younger population, to benefit all. Other problems, what could businesses do? Maybe they need to consider, one of the issues is sustainable cities, because a lot of people are migrating to the cities because that's where the work is. So maybe one thing companies could do, part of integrated thinking, is, well, they could save money by moving out to rural areas, but maybe provide employment in those rural areas to help those communities and build them. So that might be one way of considering integrated thinking, in that you're benefiting a community, you're saving in costs of your accommodation, the place that you work, because you're not paying the rates in the city, and you're benefiting the city community as well, because they are to say some of them are going to be bigger than some countries if we don't do something about it. So it's something important and something that does need to be considered.
Thanks, Fiona. I do have another question if we can squeeze it in. This one is from Maria Kostelak. She's asking, to what degree is the existing economic model behind the destructive scenarios that you've described? To what degree is that model being revised to incorporate systems thinking as part of shifting to integrated perspectives on success and profitability? So essentially moving from growth as a driver to a regenerative economy as a model for the future.
I think the IRRC has done a tremendous job in changing mindsets. I sit on the panel of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and when I first joined, I think they saw integrated reporting as just something novel, but over time and over the years, it started to become, oh, this isn't going to go away, and this is something that's going to become mainstream. So I've noticed over my time, and I was trained in, profit is good, cash is king. I've noticed that mindsets are changing. The IRRC and other groups are going out there, and also regulation is forcing people to think in a different way. We have the EU non-financial directives, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, which are great. And it involves as well teaching in our universities and our higher education, giving our future generations, informing them of what's ahead of them and what the challenges are, and teaching them, good governance. Mervyn talked about you need to move away from self-interest. It's not about self-interest, it's about forgetting self, and as I mentioned in one of the slides, in Australia, doing the right thing. Not can we, should we?